Fire Chief Crispen, who is a San Francisco native. Fire Chief Crispen brings 34 years of service to the fire department. During that time, he worked as captain in stations at Chinatown, North Beach, and Soma. Fire Chief Crispen will be replacing interim Chief Sandy Tong, who was appointed by Mayor Breed last September. Fire Chief Crispen even responded to the 9/11 attack in New York City in 2001. We all welcome Fire Chief Crispen to CSFN.
Thank you, Glenn. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for having me, inviting me to speak to you. Community service runs deep in my family. My grandmother actually started a community service group in the Mission. They call it Noe Valley now, but it was Guerrero and Duncan. It's called Lansco. It was a group for senior citizens to have a place to go, and also to support senior citizens that didn't speak English and didn't have enough money to enjoy themselves. So my grandmother was very active, and she used to bring my brother and sister and I down in the 48 Quintera from the Sunset District to go help her out down there. And, we kicked and screamed, but on the way back, it felt pretty good to be engaged with the community. So runs deep in my family. As far as our goal, our administration, we're trying to really focus on local. We want to hire local. The command staff that we assembled all have very deep ties to San Francisco. And as you stated, I clearly do. And we're also trying to get our company officers and captains in the districts to engage with community groups and members such as you folks who are engaged in the community, just so we can make sure that we're attached. From our position at headquarters, we are happy to speak to supervisors and community groups, but those are our subject matter experts on the ground. And I think having access and making the community feel like they can reach out to some of our local firefighters is very helpful. So, in addition to that, obviously disaster preparedness. I'm sure you all have some questions regarding our water supply system. We're trying to bolster our NERT program. So one of the ideas that I have is I want to make it a requirement to graduate high school in San Francisco that you have the equivalent of a NERT certification. That way we increase our participation in NERT from youngsters and kind of teach it as a way of life. It's what they do in Japan. They don't call it NERT, but it's a great program they have over there, and we've investigated it. And we think it would really be helpful. We also want to engage some of our retired firefighters to assist, because some of them, frankly, miss the firehouse culture, and I think we can involve them and have them assist because they already know our operations. So as you know, we're in the big budget crunch. We are lucky that we haven't been subject to the hiring freeze. The mayor has placed an incredible emphasis on public safety, and we appreciate that. However, we want to be judicious in our use of taxpayers' money. So we're really trying to limit overtime and spread, the costs or any pain around our department without affecting our operations. Clearly, our staffing is critical to maintain safety and our operations in an effective manner. But we are trying to limit overtime for the reason of reducing budget costs, but as well as motivating our members to use their talents to seek to promote. We have a little bit of stagnation in certain ranks. I think if we don't allow people to earn additional money in those ranks, that they will utilize their skills and provide services for the citizens that are actually even better and more robust than they're providing at the current time. So those are kind of our priorities. You're gonna see us in the budget meetings. If any of you tune into SF TV, advocating for our fleet. Our fleet is somewhat depleted. We put in budget requests over the last several years. Actually, in 2009, we had a resolution from our commission to allocate additional funds for our fleet, and it hasn't been approved. So that's one thing you're going to see from us. We're trying to prepare ourselves for everyday operation, and also for, as we know, we live in earthquake country. It's not a matter of if, but when. So prepare ourselves for when that happens. So glad to be here. Happy to answer any questions, and appreciate all of your involvement in the community.
Thank you. That being said, Charles, it looks like it's time for some questions. We have one hand raised. 936.
Okay, Chief Crispen, hello. This is Eileen Boken. We met at the Presidio Officers Club. I sent 2 questions, and the first one is about the recent fires in LA. There were beachfront homes in Malibu that burnt to the ground because Los Angeles doesn't have the ability to use salt water to put out catastrophic fires. In San Francisco, we do have that ability, but only in certain neighborhoods. I live in District 4. Did you say you grew up in the Sunset?
43rd and Kirkham. Yes. It wasn't District 4 then. It was citywide elections. But yes, I know the neighborhood very.
Okay, and Kirkham. Okay. The thing is, District 4 doesn't want to be the next Malibu. So this issue has been brought to the attention of Mayor Lurie and also to the attention of the mayor's manager, manager of state and federal affairs, and that's Eileen Feinstein-Mariano. So I've been advocating with a number of people for many years, and so what we want in District 4, we want the dedicated saltwater AWAS. We don't want the potable water version. And so what else could we do in District 4 and maybe in other neighborhoods too who don't have the dedicated AWAS? What can we do to advocate for it?
Okay, so that first of all, it's a great question. Before I really respond to it, let me tell you what we have done with regards to fire protection on the west side. We have installed 30 new cisterns, mostly in the Sunset and Richmond district, and that allows us to have 75,000 gallons to operate from to extinguish fires in the area. We've also purchased 3 new hose tenders, which can transfer water from any area where we can tap into a lake or into the existing AWSS system and extinguish fires in the Sunset District. I'm going to talk just briefly about the changes we're proposing for the potable water system. The original plan was for it to go down 42nd Avenue. We are arguing vehemently to move it to Sunset Boulevard. And the reason we're making that argument is because Sunset Boulevard is a natural fire break for us. I've been to several fires where we've had fire engines and trucks actually catch on fire or melt due to intense heat, and we don't feel that 42nd Avenue provides the amount of protection. I think it's 75 feet versus 400 that we'd acquire at Sunset Boulevard with 6 lanes of traffic, planter box in the center, and 2 areas of trees. With regards to the saltwater system, you know, saltwater has been used in fire extinguishment, but it's pretty much a last resort because it corrodes our firefighting equipment. And in LA, my understanding was one of the reasons they didn't use it is corrodes. The excessive salt kills plants and does damage to environment, as well as damages the wastewater system throughout the system. So we did advocate for a saltwater pumping station out in the Sunset District. And a study was conducted in 2021, and it was ruled out due to high construction costs, complex permitting issues. Our position now is that we have Lake Merced with 2 billion gallons of water that we can tap, and 200 million gallons is estimated to be the necessary water supply to fight fires for the entire city in a similar to 1906 type earthquake for like the 24 hours after the fire. Now, what I would say is if, you know, in LA, they did use some salt water. My understanding is they had those super scoopers that did pull water from the ocean, and they did use it for some extinguishment. I think one of them may have been involved in an accident and may not have been continuously used. But, you know, there is an effort to make some of these meetings a little more user friendly for the public. And I think advocating at some of these meetings and making sure like our MOC meetings are open to the public and public comment can be involved in them. And I think you can probably make some inroads by stating your case in those meetings.
Okay, thank you.
That was a good question,
Sure.
too, I might add. I would like to say could you save your next question, Eileen, and we'll come right back to you.
Okay. Yes.
Barbara, your turn.
Yeah.
Great question.
Dean, I live in District 2, and I don't know if you're aware, but there's a plan across the city to do major upzoning in the northern and western parts of the city. I know that our fire station is number 16 on Greenwich, and I don't
Yes.
think it has the capability to deal with high buildings. And there is a plan to upzone in the marina in Cow Hollow and the whole district, which is now 4 stories, and it could be anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30-story buildings. There has been no discussion about how to protect these buildings if there's a fire, given that the fire station we have in our district doesn't have the ladder capacity, I believe, if I'm saying that correctly, to deal with higher buildings. Is this something you're aware of?
It's a great question and a very valid point. So typically, our aerial ladders, which are 100 feet in length, are designed to access the roof and 7 stories or lower buildings. However, anything over 75 feet in San Francisco is considered a high rise. So in a high rise building, should these proposals be actually should come to fruition, they are going to have to be what's considered fire resistive buildings. And a fire resistive building has several components. One, it means that the building can survive the burnout of its contents. Another feature would be a dedicated fire control room with a robust alarm panel system. It will also have to have evacuation stairwells and a full alarm system and sprinkler system. So although those buildings would not, typically our aerial ladder goes to the roof and we're able to ventilate. And those type of buildings would have HVAC system where they can actually ventilate the smoke that duplicates what our efforts would be if we went to the roof. So the firefighting tactics for those type of buildings is significantly different. But it is a valid question. And trust me, our fire prevention people will make sure that those buildings provide all the necessary protections for buildings of those size.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Very good. Amari, Eliza, you're next.
Okay, well, that brings up another question. This isn't the one I was going to ask, but I used to work with people who were involved with fire sprinkler systems and insuring them and that sort of thing and rating them. So I'm familiar with the different types of sprinkler systems one can have. There's the dry systems, there's the wet ones, et cetera, et cetera. So would this mean that you would be keeping water on the top of the roof so that you'd have the water available? Or would this be like a dry system that you'd be pumping the water into? Or would this be a high pressure system? Or does it matter to you one way or the other? When you're talking about sprinkling them.
Yeah, most of the new buildings that are installed have a combination system with a dedicated water main that supplies sprinkler water. So it usually is dry throughout the building, but it is a dedicated source. So it has sufficient water and goes to a pump that usually either on the roof or in the basement that will pump the water and have sufficient output from the sprinkler heads.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Could
you.
I ask the question I had asked originally then?
No, that's one question at a time, Mari. We'll have you right after George. Thank you. Mike Knorr, please.
This is kind of a long question, but in the city, for instance, I have a next door neighbor. He is a massive hoarder. He can't even live in his house. He doesn't have any services to his house, no garbage pickup or anything because he cannot live in it. His car is completely filled up. What can be done to protect the people that live next door, especially when he was a mechanic for the city and he has large oil drums in his garage, or he used to years ago, huge oil drums, tires, all these flammables that if his house catches fire, all of the neighbors are going to be fried. And it's not just him. You can drive through our neighborhood. In fact, I've had 5 cars get moved. And what I did is they'll have their cars parked right up against the house where no one could get in. No fire, no services if somebody had a heart attack. They just park their car blocking the driveway, blocking their entrance to their house. And the tires are blown out. The cars have been there for over a decade in some cases, because I've looked them up on Zillow and they were there 10 years ago. So the cars aren't moving. So what I've done is I will go and leave a flyer on their car saying, would you donate your car to Cars for Kids or one of those? And I've actually gotten cars moved where people actually did it. But in some ways, they just need to know here's an option to get rid of my car instead of just leaving it as an eyesore. Because I know cars are one of the main causes of fires. So if they're just leaving these beached cars in front of their places, why isn't the city taking more action to try to get these cars out of where they're at?
I agree.
Good.
I've had, unfortunately, living in the city, I've had neighbors like that present a bit of a hazard, or major hazard. Our Fire Prevention Bureau will definitely investigate if there is valuable evidence that somebody is presenting a fire hazard. But I don't think they will be allowed to enter somebody's home based on somebody saying that they have flammables in there. They would have to visualize them. They'd have to be visible from the street, because they will not have a warrant to go in there unless there's just cause. Now, as far as the cars go, that's more of a DPT thing. We don't really move cars. If they're blocking sidewalk or have some other illegality, then I think DPT would be the person. Actually, they're called MTA now. Would be the agency to call, and we're happy to work with them. Our main thing with cars is lithium cars. But for a normal vehicle, if it's in the driveway, and I'm sure some of you folks have heard about the latest issues with some cars blocking the sidewalk, that would be a way to get the car towed. So if you make the call and they're actually blocking the sidewalk, that car should be removed.
Even if it's blocking so you cannot gain access to a house if somebody's having a heart attack because you can't get in the front door?
I have never seen.
I can show you pictures
so
of
I'm
it.
assuming that the drive. Well,
let me offer this, that the Conservancy for people that are mentally incapacitated could be a possible solution for you on that. That would be my
let me add to that. We do have an APS protective services. If somebody's not able to take care of themselves.
Okay, George Wooding, you're next.
Thank you, Glenn. And thank you for speaking with us tonight, Mr. Crispen. My question is really simple. Why are San Francisco fire trucks so heavy and so low to the ground? I understand that they have no more than 6 inches of clearance, and that's why you'll see speed bumps, which are supposed to be speed bumps, cut out so people can just drive right through, because the fire trucks can't go over the speed bump. So I'm curious why our fire trucks are so ponderous.
Is that you, George, asking the question, Mr. Wooding?
Yes, that's George Wooding.
Yes, you can call me George. Yeah.
Looks familiar. I didn't hear most of your question, but we have advocated for a lot of reduction in street changes because of access issues for us. Our apparatus are damaged, and in fact, we're reevaluating the entire city because this is a new thing since I've come into office here. We have distinct routes that we take to incidents. They were designed a long time ago. Some have changed, but they're mostly designed to keep us away from commercial areas to get the most direct route. And those areas should not have those speed humps there. And if they do, they should at least have the cutout so we can drive over them. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but we're looking at all that. We try to work with MTA to understand the needs of everybody. But when it comes to public safety, we have the ability to put our foot down. We have in many cases, but we're looking at it, reevaluating the entire city in regard to our routes and making sure that we're not having block issues with being blocked or bumps affecting our response.
Thank you for that response. Maria Eliza, I'm looking forward to your second question.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. That would be one of the things that citizens are the most concerned about right now is your ability to get across town when you need to. My question has more to do with the fires that are being set, it appears on purpose by certain people, and whether or not it's possible to move the cases forward to determine how the fires are being set and bring some people to justice. And could you, if you can't do it at this meeting tonight, is there some way we could talk to you at some later date about the process you go through to investigate the cause of the fires and the way that you handle the cases alongside the police department? Because I understand at some point this becomes a criminal matter if it's determined they were set on purpose. And that's basically it.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mari.
We're concerned about the lack of prosecutions for certain offenders or certain fires in certain neighborhoods that has caused people to be really put out of their homes for long periods of time. Thank you.
All right, Dean.
Mari, great question. Obviously a huge concern of mine. Here I'm having connectivity issues, but I think the gist of your question is, what is our process for prosecuting folks that are accused of intentionally lighting fires? So when we respond to a fire, we have 34 fires respond, and there is usually a division chief who's the incident commander. And at the point of the fire, we will determine cause and origin. If we see it, obviously a cooking fire or obviously a candle or something obvious, we will make a determination. We are unsure as to what caused the fire, that we call our 4710 unit, which is our investigators. And they are trained police officers. They respond and conduct a thorough investigation using eyewitness cameras and other technology to try to figure out exactly what caused the fire. And if they, my father was an arson investigator, the process pretty well. And then they will prosecute based.
You know, Dean, I was going to recommend you take the video off of your screen so that we can hear you better, if that's possible. The next question we have is going to be for Mike Knorr, please. If we can get our speaker back. Oh, there you. Please, Dean Crispen, would you be kind enough to remove your video? It could make your voice stronger.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, Mike.
Okay.
You're muted, Mike. You're muted, Mike.
I keep hearing how there are these pumper trucks that are going to be able to pump water from the lake and stuff like that. But let's say the fire is at Lincoln and 19th. How far can these hoses feasibly go based on physics where over a certain length, the pressure is going to start dropping? How far can you feasibly pull? And if there's an earthquake and people are evacuating, aren't there going to be people driving over those hoses if they're running for blocks on end from wherever they're pulling from? I'm just trying to understand the physics behind how you're actually able to get enough water and pressure over long distances.
Sure, and that's a great question. So what we set up, let me answer your last question first. We have ramps that we set up over our hose so people can actually drive over them in intersections. And that is for what we would do is set up what's called an above ground hydrant system. And we use our 5-inch hose to accomplish that. And our 5-inch hose, our new hose tender carries 6,000 feet of hose. And we have 3 new ones and we have 4 existing hose tenders. So between those, we have a lot of hose, and we can also do what's called relay pumping. And it's what they do typically in the wildland setting, is where you position engine companies specifically in positions to relay water and increase the pressure. And we feel that we can have enough volume. We try on our high pressure above ground system, we usually try to find 2 water sources. So let's say we found water at Spreckles Lake we found water at Lake Merced. We could actually use those two sources and pump into the system and have sufficient water. Now, please keep in mind, our job in a major disaster is to encapsulate the fire. We're going to have to make very difficult decisions if you have a block that's on fire and we have to make a decision to stop it at a certain fire break. As I said, Lincoln Way, Sunset Boulevard, Ocean Avenue, these larger streets where we have the ability to protect larger areas. So we have to make really difficult decisions, and we train on that. We have what we call windshield surveys, where our companies will go out in the area and say, okay, now you have this block going and you have a critical piece of infrastructure we're trying to protect. So we train on that all the time, and it's a great question. But we do have the ability to pump a very significant distance. In fact, the distance that you're saying from, I think you said Lincoln Way, all the way to Lake Merced.
Okay.
All right, very good question.
Thanks.
George Pudding, please.
And then
Thank
I
you.
would like to ask a question from Diamond Heights.
Okay, since you'll be right after Steve Ward. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Leanne. Real quickly, I know that the fire department and the police department are the only two departments not getting cuts next year, although we're running a gigantic budget deficit. And most departments are going to be cut by 15% per Mayor Lurie. So I was curious, what what is the expected pay increase of the fire department union over the next 2 years?
It's a good question. So you're right. The lion's share of our budget goes to salaries, and it's determined on our MOU. And I think 90% of our budget goes to salaries. So I believe our budget, our MOU is up in 2026. I think there's moderate raises up until then of 1.5%. And then we will renegotiate. And clearly, as we've done before, as a former union member, our union typically is willing to make concessions based on the budget crisis that we're facing. So those negotiations will start in 2025, probably, well, maybe later in the year, and we will hopefully have some agreement with the union to address this budget crisis collaboratively.
Thank you,
Thank you.
George. Thank you, George. Rick Hall, please.
Yeah. I'm not sure where, but I saw that after the LA fires, there's one jurisdiction that is, I think it's being asked to create a state law requiring that all pumps that are all electric pumps that are in for fire service have redundant backup generators to basically keep the electric pumps going during a fire when the power is out. Do we have any situations like that? You were mentioning something about the high rises and but I didn't quite get it. But do we have situations where we're reliant on the overhead existing electric power to either refill our cisterns or to reach certain heights? And if so, is there backup generation capability to keep those pumping units available?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So all of the fire department facilities have backup generators power. So most of them I think all of them are diesel operated. They're tested every Monday to ensure that they have enough fuel and can and function properly. Now, private buildings are also required in the code to have backup generator power. So we feel that in the case of a complete power outage, that generator will at least get them. It's required to be operational for 72 hours. So if they lose complete power for an electric pump for their fire suppression system, that backup generator should kick in and provide power for the fire pumps.
Thank you.
Very good. Maria Liza, please.
I'm sorry, I was not able to understand your answer to my question. Is it possible for you to answer it again? Because
I'm
what
happy.
I understand you said was
I was-
that the fire department hands the investigation over to the police department. Is that correct? And what is the process again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I may have been unclear in my response. So typically what happens in a fire is we send 34 firefighters. They're commanded by an assistant chief. The assistant chief is the ultimate authority to make a determination on cause and origin. However, they will use the evidence presented from the firefighters inside the building. So a captain or a lieutenant may say, okay, we had a candle that was knocked over. We saw it obviously, or we saw somebody cigarette butts and somebody clearly was accidental. If we cannot determine clear cause of origin on the scene, we summon our 4710 unit, which is our fire investigation unit, and they respond and they conduct a full investigation using photos, interviews, any kind of technology that they can use, cameras. They conduct an investigation. They're sworn peace officers. They take that information, they prepare a report, and they determine cause and origin themselves, which is, if it's determined to be arson, then they have a police officer, I think it's a lieutenant actually, that's assigned to our arson unit, and they collaboratively will prosecute. And I said this, but I'm not sure if you heard, they have a very high prosecution rate compared to other crimes in the city.
Good.
Nice. Steve Ward, please.
Don't forget me.
We won't.
I just wanted to know, I'm sure you're aware, because this is your former neighborhood of Proposition K, and the closure of the Upper Great Highway, and also the closure of the extension from Sloat to Skyline. As it stands right now, that on Friday, what happens is all the traffic is mitigated down the Lower Great Highway and into the neighborhoods and so on and so forth. But the future plan is to really deter the traffic so it goes to Sunset Boulevard. And I was just wondering whether you foresee any access problems that are caused or will be caused by the closure of the Upper Great and the extension.
Great question. Something that's coming up in a lot of conversations we've had. We don't take political positions on propositions. I think everybody will acknowledge that with, a closed Upper Great Highway, there may be a little more pressure on some of the other arteries to evacuate potentially, but we don't have designated evacuation routes or evacuation sites. We have evacuation plans that are kind of installed based on the emergency, and that is done by Department of Emergency Management. So they'll come up with an announcement. It used to be on our sirens, which aren't functioning. I'm working on that. Now we're using our fire engines and police officers to announce, and I know I'm focusing on tsunami here, but to announce the evacuation plan. And as far as the evacuation using the Upper Great Highway, we still have the ability to remove the barriers at the end. We have keys and we can remove it, so we can use it. And I'm not sure what the plan is for the park that's supposed to be there, if it's supposed to entirely block traffic for an emergency egress. That's still being mapped out. So more to follow on that. I'm happy to look into it a little more if that would help.
Leanne Prifty.
Thank you. Congratulations, Chief. We welcome you aboard. I represent the Diamond Heights Community Association. We meet at the Police Academy in Diamond Heights.
Okay.
And for many years, we traditionally always had the chief come up and speak to the neighborhood once a year, and then that fell by the wayside, and we need to re-establish that. We have a little gym in our neighborhood called Glen Canyon, and there used to be abatement measures, but I don't think there have been any for at least 20 years. And just on principle, we'd like the neighborhood to have a chance to meet you. And so in the future, could we schedule you to come up and speak to us at the police academy?
I would love to. I'd be more than happy to. If you, I can give you my email address and you can reach out and my assistant can schedule me. I'd be honored.
Oh, that would be fantastic. If
mind
you could give me a phone number to begin with.
Sure.
Put it on the chat, Dean.
Oh, now you're testing my capabilities here.
No, I want him to give me a contact.
Yeah, she needs it verbally.
Are you ready?
From the chief. Yeah, I'm ready.
You want a phone number or email?
Both.
Okay, 415.
Yeah.
971.
971.
2788.
2788. And who would I be speaking to?
That's my cell phone number.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Good.
And then what's your email address?
Dean.Crispen@sfgov.org. PEN.
And how do you spell Crispen?
CRIS. P as in Peter, EN.
Oh, Crispen. Okay. At what?
sfgov.org.
Oh, yes, sfgov.org. Okay.
Thank you,
so
Leanne.
that would be a future meeting.
Leanne, do you mind if I speak to one thing that you mentioned that?
I would love it.
Okay. Glen Canyon. So there's several areas in San Francisco. They did a survey, CAL FIRE did a survey in 2008, identifying what hazard areas were in California.
Okay.
Glen Canyon was determined to be a moderate hazard. Now,
okay.
This is interesting to everybody, I think. February 24th,
okay.
CAL FIRE is coming out with their updated fire hazard severity zones. And we are very interested to see what comes of it. If anything is determined to be high hazard zone, then that is going to trigger some requirements for homeowners potentially.
Okay.
So it may defensible space, may have to make a natural hazard disclosure, and there's going to be different building codes that the buildings constructed in those areas are going to have to be built to. So,
well, the residents are going to want to know about that. And then of course you have the high school.
I'm sorry, Leanne, one question only. Thank you. I wanted to mention there's also going to be a cost of insurance will probably be going up too. All that being said, next question is for me, and I wanted to mention that in the chat it says that one of the Greg Scott mentioned the protective services could take care of the neighbor who's doing the hoarding for you, Mike Noor. Now, my question is, Kubota pipe is a pipe that is built in Japan, supposed to withstand 9.0 earthquakes. Are you familiar with that pipe, and are you using it in San Francisco?
Great question. That's the pipe that we're using we call it the poofs, to install in the potable water system. In fact, I saw it with my own eyes recently because they're installing it in some new installations over, it's called the Power Station off of 23rd Street. So it is a more robust pipe. You're right. It's designed in Japan, and that's what we're using. But it's expensive.
Great
$42
news.
million
Thank you.
$42 million.
How much? How much is it? Wow.
$2 million a mile.
Wow. $2 million a mile.
Yeah.
Wow.
Barbara Hefferman. Hefferman.
Sorry. Dean, I'm going back to that first question I asked about fire trucks in higher buildings.
Sure.
Does Station 16, or do you know if Station 16 has the capability of ladders to reach up to 7 stories?
Oh, I'm sorry if I didn't answer that. Yes. So our
Okay.
ladders are designed for 7 stories or less. And
Okay, and in all the stations, because our station 16 is small.
no, there's a ladder truck in there. So that's a
Okay,
double house. It has an engine and a truck company.
okay,
And
thank
at
you.
any incident that's significant, 2 ladder trucks will arrive. So we'll have 2 trucks with capability of reaching 7 stories.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Mike Knorr again.
Hi. I've actually even hosted affordable housing meetings, and one of the things that I push for on these affordable housing meetings is why isn't there more emphasis on building the infrastructure needed for fire, water, transportation, all this stuff, instead of building first, which seems like to be what they're doing, build first and then worry later that somebody's going to put in the right sewer and water and all the other things. Because the reality is adding 87,000 housing units in the next 5 to 7 years. Currently, we have about 400,000 housing units. That would be a 20% increase. So basically, it would be like taking the entire Sunset and several other districts and doubling everything that's currently there. It just seems like an enormous amount of housing, and we don't have the infrastructure really adequate for certain things that we already need. So I don't know why there isn't more of a pushback from like the fire department saying, wait, if you want that many houses, you need to have this in place first. They're doing it at Treasure Island. They're putting in all the stuff they need out there before they build. They're not doing that in the city.
Good
Great
question.
Um, I agree with you. It's something we need to place more emphasis on. Now, some of the larger developments have baked into their agreements that they have to either provide money for improvements, utility improvements, and fire protection improvements. And some actually have to have that installed because obviously when they're digging up the street would be the right time to install it. Now, for example, the ones I know of, Hunters Point, the Ocean Avenue Reservoir Project, Park Merced. So they've baked some of those numbers into the deal to have those installed. But I don't know if, unless it's a really big development, and I can look into the number that triggers it, but we definitely support what you're saying.
All right. So let's see, Charles Head, do you have any questions that we haven't asked? We don't have any more questions up on the board. Do you have any in your list of questions that haven't been answered that are very good? I take it back. We
Well-
got Fred Sanchez wants to ask a question, and then Charles, you're going to be asked to provide some questions from the list that we gave you all.
Well, my name is Fred Sanchez. I'm the retired deputy chief of the San Francisco Fire Department. I'll be retired 20 years in April. I want to assure you that Dean Crispen, he's part of, as I told Mayor Lurie, the dream team. He's the most qualified fire chief San Francisco has had from an operational standpoint of any chief in probably 20 or 30 years.
Amen.
Uh, I met with the Lurie people they asked me over 2 years ago to come, Tom Dudier, talk about the AWSS, extending that to the Sunset. And I met with the Lurie people and I told them, the cost of bringing that out to the Sunset, it's over $1 million a block to bring that out there. And fortunately, San Francisco has now, like Dean talked about, these 3 additional hose tenders that actually have water on them and capacity to use 5-inch hose and draft from lakes and all these things. And with the 2-story buildings predominantly in the Sunset, a AWS system would never be used. They have now far faster capabilities with these new hose tenders. I'm sure the chief could, show you one of these things and their capabilities, but rest assured, I am so confident now, being probably, I went to the National Fire Academy. I have a master's degree in public administration. I am so pleased that Dean Crispen is the new fire chief and everybody in San Francisco. It's too early to tell, but I'll rest you assured he's going to end up as one of the greatest chiefs in the history of the fire department.
Thank you, Fred. Really appreciate that. That was good to know. Charles, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I have a couple of questions that have not been asked yet.
Yes, please go ahead.
Having to do with before a fire, during a fire, after a fire. Before a fire, Chief, do you think that enough is being done for clearing brush, trimming trees, et cetera, to prevent the spread of a fire if one should start? Number two, do you think that San Francisco has a problem with access of fire trucks during a fire to transit to where it is because of this Safe Street program, which is blocking off, limiting access to certain streets, which makes it seem to me that it would be very hard the way that Kirkham and on other streets and in my neighborhood are being limited. And number three, after a fire, do you feel that people should be not just encouraged, but almost limited to rebuilding with non-flammable materials, that the rebuilding process should be a fire prevention process? Thank you.
Okay, good questions. First question regarding fire protection around the home. At this point in San Francisco, it is a personal responsibility to clear brush, trim trees, provide defensible space around your home. As I stated earlier, this new fire hazard severity zone issue, if anything is determined to be a high hazard zone, then homeowners are going to be required to have 100 foot of defensible space. So that's going to trigger some action from homeowners. Now, we're obviously concerned about the cost for homeowners and us for our buildings that are on hills and other areas, but it is a personal responsibility. My understanding from being a San Franciscan and understand you can trim trees up to your property line. Now, inducing your neighbors to do the same can be a challenge, as the other gentleman stated with the neighbor issue. So I think some of those problems may be mandated going forward, but we always recommend for safety purposes that people trim trees and clear brush. Your second question was access. We have some issues with access. What we do is when MTA suggests a street change, we go out there with our fire truck and we test it and see whether we can actually get our truck around a corner in proper position. These buildings in San Francisco were built with the assumption that fire engines and trucks can get in front of them and put water into the building to extinguish the fire and have an aerial ladder, extend a ladder to the roof. If we determine that there's any building in the city that does not have that because of these new slow streets, etc., we vet those and we don't allow people to install those. Now, we try to be reasonable, but there are some cases where we really insist on them making changes, and we have done that in a significant amount of cases. Your third question with regards to post-fire and rebuilding. Now, I think we're all well aware that most of the building resources are going to Los Angeles now. So it's going to be very challenging for anybody to have any construction done in San Francisco. I think it's a pretty obvious problem that we're going to have. But there are, there's new building codes. They're called WUI building codes that are specifically to harden your home from fire. And you're going to see all these homes in these dangerous areas in Los Angeles having to adhere to these codes. Now, it does add cost to the home with regards to building materials. What they found there is a lot of these homes have, to provide ventilation for their attic space, they have openings. And they found that a lot of the fire was entering those openings. So what you're going to see is homes being built with those openings having some kind of shutter system that doesn't allow fire to penetrate. And you're going to see, again, some more robust fire protection construction, more tiled stone, and a lot less combustible materials being used on the exterior of a building.
Good news. And thank you. Mike Knorr, one more question. This is the last question. We've almost been doing this for an hour, and it's been very entertaining.
Yeah, very interesting. So related to the issue of adding these 87,000 houses in the next 5 to 7 years, I've gone to a lot of corners where I see they're rebuilding, and it was a 2-story, but now they're making it 4-story. And I'm like, but if our goal is really to add 87,000 units in the next 7 years, why aren't they making mandates that new construction should all be 7 stories? Because if we know that your trucks can get up 7 stories, and that's the maximum height that your trucks can reach, shouldn't all new construction that's being built be under the guise that if you're going to build there, build it to the height that we can reach the first time? You know, like it just seems like if you're building, build it to the height and go from there. So
I understand your question, Mike, and it's a good one, but it's probably better suited for the planning commission or planning department. They're the ones who determine what's feasible and what isn't, and building construction and heights of that, things of that nature.
okay.
All right, we have one more question. George, this is it. No more
Yeah,
questions.
no, it's not a question, it's just a clarification for Mike. Planning right now under the new laws and regulations, houses on corners can be up to 6 stories high. The planning department right now is looking to add up to 8 stories. So that will be coming. Of course, they could do 7 as well. In mid-block, it'll probably be 4 stories when they split a lot, a normal residential lot. And on NCDs, which are neighborhood corridors, that's where they plan to build up to 140 feet. And that'll be a challenge for the fire department, for planning. Along Caltrans on 19th Avenue, they may go as high as 240 feet. So I work with planning all the time, so I'm kind of up on that.
Thank you for that question. It didn't actually sound like a question, but Dean Crispen, I want to thank you so much for being our guest speaker tonight. And I, for one, learned a whole lot from this discussion, and we welcome you back anytime.
I truly appreciate you all for having me and your commitment to serving the communities and being involved. Fred Sanchez, I'd like to hire you back if you want to come back to the fire department. You sound like you still have a lot of knowledge. All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Dean.
you, and congratulations.
Congratulations.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.